Hey everyone. Welcome Henrik.
Thank you.
Welcome to the True Intent podcast. My name is Fred and I'm here with Henrik Wenøe from Acuity World. Henrik, he has more than 20 years of experience within NLP, coaching sales professionals and doing leadership seminars, implementing the tools and techniques from Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And we're here today to learn much more about what NLP is all about and get a lot of insights and perspective on how to actually work with this, because it's nothing new. And it's actually also kind of simple, but at the same time complex, because it is human beings that we're dealing with. So I'm very excited to invite everyone in here today. And with you, Henrik, we have a lot to uncover. And actually, this is just the first episode of a three-piece set where we will get the opportunity to dive deep into not just what is NLP and new NLP and but also how to work with it. How can you learn to lead yourself? And in time, how do you learn to lead others?
First time I came into contact with NLP, I didn't really knew it was NLP because that was back in '86. And I was a part of rolling out a training in the Danish Scout Association. Later, 10 years later, I realized, wow, that was actually an NLP training. But back in '86, there was nobody in Denmark who knew about NLP. So the consultants who had developed and designed that program for the Danish Scout Association didn't use the NLP word. He basically put it into Danish. So it was only 10 years later, I invited an NLP master practitioner to do a one-day training for my scout leaders. I really understood the potential in that whole toolbox, skill set, mindset, or whatever you called it. And that was in, I think, '97. And my formal training started in '98, where I joined a NLP practitioner training. And from there, it just rolled on. Became a trainer in 2000. And last year, I was even certified as an NLP master trainer by Dr. Richard Bandler, one of the co-founders of NLP.
And this is the NLP. You're not just doing this here in Denmark. You're traveling all over the world and working together with Richard Bandler. For everyone who doesn't know, it was the founder of NLP. And what's interesting is that you and I actually met when I was coming out here to try to sell you a stress measurement program using neurotechnology. Yeah. But we ended up doing a podcast, and I actually had the opportunity to attend one of your trainings for the personal leadership program. So even though I try to sell you, and you must have been doing something right, because it turned out to go the other way around.
So for me again, I think I'm always selling and I'm never selling. Yeah. For me, that's the mindset, because I think if you go in with the mindset of selling something to somebody, you set yourself up for creating not the best experiences for other people. So I think really my ambition is almost never to sell, but very often to understand what other people really, really want and then help them get that. Yeah. And again, if I can be of assistance in helping you get what you want, now we have an opportunity to actually create real value. For me, that's how I think about it. And it's not normal, because a lot of people still want to sell, and I think it's not the right starting point, if you ask me.
No. You started way back as a scout leader, but today you are managing a company called Acuity World. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to pass?
Yeah, but again, I started out being really active as a scout leader. I did a lot of training as a scout leader, but I also had that belief that you could not really have a life based on doing scout trainings, because you do that for free. Yeah. So I became a chemical engineer. I even got a bachelor in sales and marketing at Copenhagen Business School. I started a career in sales, was a salesperson, sales and marketing manager. And on that journey, I was on the outlook for skills and tools which could help me be successful as a sales manager. And that was really where I came into contact with NLP again, because I really saw that that model had a potential to really increase my communication skills. So that was my motivation for starting that journey. Then, being in the journey, I realized that, wow, NLP is so much more than communication. And that was really what ignited, you could say, my own passion for learning again. Because after I had spent, 10 years in primary school, 3 years in gymnasium, 4 years becoming a chemical engineer, 3 years doing my bachelor in sales and marketing, basically any passion of learning was totally beaten out of me. So I needed some time to recover from those years. But I think when I came into contact with NLP, it so much spoke to who I am, that I just got this passion for learning again. And I have been on that track since 98.
That's amazing, because discovering who you are is also one of the primary ideas I got from bringing you on this podcast, because I've been searching for my own true intent for a while now. And when I read the first book that you gave me after the first meeting that we had, and I looked at the different tools and techniques, I was like, wow, this actually sounds like somebody who's been able to develop tools and techniques to actually not just talk about who you are, what you want to be, but also actually practice it. But to return back, because we're going to dive much more into what NLP is all about, but I want to quickly just circle back on Acuity World. So Acuity, for people not knowing that word, what does it mean? One, and secondly, what problem are you solving?
Yeah, I would say that if we start with the last question first, and that's basically, we don't solve any problems because we don't believe in problems.
Boom.
And I think this is really where I think we have an edge. And I think that's why I'm traveling the world, because there's not many people who do NLP the way we do it. Because classically, when you work, you start out by saying, we need to understand what's the problem and how can I come up with a solution to fix that problem. And basically, I would say I had an experience back in 2000 which in a way transformed my whole mindset. And since that day, I don't believe in problem anymore.
But aren't people motivated by problems?
I think you can motivate people by problems, but it's not sustainable. And also, again, if you want to motivate people by problems, you have to basically bring the other person into fear mode. And I don't think that's an ethical way of motivating people. No. It's highly effective short term. It's used broadly on all levels of societies. It's used in sales leadership. It's used in any kind of leadership. I think Kotter talks about, if you want to make a change in an organization, you need to create a sense of urgency. And he do that by showing people how to create a burning platform, which is basically sharing a message which informs people that either you jump or you die. So you're basically forcing people to take action. And I think it's highly unethical way of operating a system. We are much more teaching people how to go to where the problem isn't. And then from there, understand where do you want to go. And then we help people build a burning desire which can pull people into the desired future. And by doing that, of course, we will end up with less problems, but we don't let the problems dictate what we do and what we don't do.
It's very interesting, because when I look into the world, and whether it would be in professional leadership, sales, personal development, going to a therapist, people, they always talk about that they want to change, but they never really do something about it until they are absolutely fed up with the current state of environment.
Again, in the classical model, people need to be close to dying before they act. But again, when I meet people, I see that there's much more that works for them that don't. And I think a lot of people in this world could really get a beautiful life if they could simply understand that, wow, you're actually okay. It doesn't mean that you're perfect, but you're okay. You're breathing. You have clothes. Most likely you have been eating today if you wanted to. So So actually, you're safe.
It's a big paradigm shift for people, apparently.
But a lot of people think that they need to be different to be okay, instead of realizing that, in fact, you are okay. This is who you are. The issue is that people think that they should be something else than themselves, and they often sucks at that. Because again, the idea we work from, and this is not strictly NLP, but we work from this insight that people are born too early. So humans are born into dependency. The first many years of their life, they're depending on parents, on adults who can take care of them. And as I normally say in my trainings, this gives a lot of value because it means that we can transfer learning from one generation to the next and so on. But it also comes with this price that if the first many, many years of your life, you're dependent on somebody else, your life is not about being you. Your life becomes much more about who can I be so that the person I'm depending on likes me so that I can survive. And again, it's not easy to be the way you have to be so that somebody else can be okay and then really enjoy the ride. And that's why people are getting confused, because they think they have to be something else than who they are. And that's why they're on this constant quest of finding themselves. So people tend to search for answers in the wrong place, instead of actually searching where the answer is. And the answer for me have never been found in a very effective way if you start out by asking, what's the problem? But you're going to where most people place the light. They place easily the light on the problem, but that's not where the solution is. You need to go to where the problem isn't, because that's where you can find the real and true answer to who you are. And again, so that's basically what we're doing. Yeah. And this is not what I would say classical NLP, because if you say classical NLP, what is that? If you ask Richard Bandler, he would say, wow, NLP is basically about studying excellence and success, and then putting that into a formula so that you can teach other people to become a success. So what he did together with John Grinder back in the early 70s was that they went out and studied some really, really excellent therapists, very good communicators, and identified the strategies they were using, which seems to give results for people which other therapists have basically given up upon.
Because it actually came from Fritz Perls, who was a founder of Gestalt therapy.
Yeah, he was one of the people who they modeled. They also modeled Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson. Extremely good therapists. And again, what they ended up describing were their strategies, but Fritz Perls, Virginia Satir, and Milton Erickson, they were all looking for problems and were solving problems. So that resulted in that a lot of people who practice NLP thought that they also had to look for problems and solve problems. I would say today, Bandler have moved more in the direction of where we are working, bringing people into a good state, and from there, bringing them into their desired state. But still a lot of people today, even in the NLP community, are working really problem-based. They don't spend a lot of time in the problem compared to other psychological tools, where they can spend 3 to 5 years dwelling into the problems. So basically, NLP spent relatively short time in problems, but since the problem is defining the starting point, you will never find the true real solution which will actually help the person become who they truly want to be. I think what we do is that we help people move into being okay as a starting point. And when they're okay and know that, wow, this is who I am, then we ask them, what do you want? Because from that position of being themselves, they have access to the real answer.
I noted down here that what you do and how I believe it relates to the theme of this podcast is that you teach people who they are when they're actually themselves,
Yeah.
and to help them find a place in the world where they can be that person.
Yes.
I think that's very beautiful.
Yeah. And then we do this with salespeople because we believe that if a salesperson show up at the doorstep of the customer, being themselves, being okay, they don't need anything. And a salesperson who is not needy are much better at listening to what the customer truly wants. And since the salesperson don't need anything, they don't need to distort what the customer say so that it fits what they need, because they don't need anything. So they can listen much more clearly. And that brings us back to one of the questions you asked a few minutes ago. What does acuity mean? And acuity means people who have high level of acuity are good at reading the signals of the other person, so they can listen and see what's actually being communicated. And you only have access to those information if you are not in a needy mode. Because if you need something, you will distort what the other person is saying so it fits your need. But if you work from a clean position of already being okay, now the person can say anything because you don't need them to say something specific, and that allows you to actually understand what they truly want. And for me, that's the foundation of establishing a good cooperation with the other person, because if you don't understand what they want, you will end up, again, creating the wrong solution. So again, for me, again, whether you use this for personal growth and development, whether you use it as a professional, it's the same thing. It's really about believing that I'm actually okay as I am. I don't need to change anything. I don't need to fix anything. I am who I am. And I'm actually alive, breathing, okay. That doesn't mean that I don't want to improve myself in certain areas. That doesn't mean that I don't want to learn something. That's fine. But if you ask yourself the question, what do I want from a position where you're already okay, now you tend to want things which actually match who you want to be even more. And that just add a very different depth of motivation and energy to actually getting it.
What if some people, including myself, have limiting beliefs that is maybe more subconscious than they're actually aware of?
Yeah.
So even though I'd want to have a certain outcome or go in a certain direction, there'd be something within me that is holding me back without me actually being aware of it.
I know.
How do you tackle this?
Again, you don't tackle the limiting belief.
No.
You bring the person to where that belief doesn't exist.
Where's that?
That's for you, is where you're truly yourself. Because when you're truly yourself, then what's possible?
Anything.
You understand?
Yeah.
So how many limiting beliefs do you have there?
Probably none.
You understand?
Yeah.
So instead of fixing the problem with a limiting belief, I bring you to where the problem isn't. And then I teach you to live from there. Because then I fix your limiting beliefs, I fix your self-doubt, I fix your all the shit you have when you're not yourself. And again, this sounds very, very simple. The reason why it's not so easy is that to truly know who you are when you're truly yourself, it's contained on a deeper level than language.
Yeah.
It's contained in your somatic form. And that's outside most people's awareness and consciousness.
What does somatic mean?
Bodily. So it's you, who you know yourself to be when you are yourself are much more hidden in this part of the brain than this part of the brain. So again, here people are searching in the wrong part of the brain for that kind of answer. So what I do when I work with people is that I'm much more paying attention to what they're doing than what they're saying. So I noticed where you were looking when you talked about who you are when you're truly yourself. So for me, that's a much more powerful answer than the words coming out of your mouth.
And that's a whole paradigm shift right there. To actually be aware of what people are saying, but what they're not expressing with words.
What they're communicating.
Yeah.
What they're communicating, as I say, before, between, and beyond words. So I'm hearing your words, but I'm also noticing what you're communicating outside your own awareness. So basically, besides being certified in NLP, I'm also certified in a tool or a skill set, mindset developed by Dr. Joseph Riggio called semantic modeling, which is basically about teaching, reading people and see what is it that they communicate and how do they communicate to themselves when they're truly themselves. So I can teach them to be themselves. The way they already know themselves to be, but they are not aware of how they do it. So I make them conscious about how they can lead themselves to be okay, so that they don't need anything, because from that starting point, they can start to want something. So it's really about creating a pure towards motivation instead of working with what we in NLP call an away from motivation.
Yeah, and I'd like to actually dive a little bit into that approach, because usually when you go to a leadership or a seminar or workshop or any kind, there's a lot of talk and it goes directly to the brain and you feel a bit motivated and you go home and like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then it kind of withers away a little bit. But I remember doing the teachings with you at the PLP course, we did visualization exercises. We used our breath and our physiology, which is actually also trying to speak a different language to a different part of your brain. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You can say that, again, a lot of people attend a training because they believe that they have to be fixed. So, and again, people go to trainings and they get a fix. But often they then, after a few weeks, maybe they got that fix, but then what about the next thing? Because there's endless amount of things that doesn't work when you're not really yourself. So you see, our learning philosophy is really based on the whole idea of bringing the participant into the space where they're truly themselves. And then from that healthy core, we add different skills and strategies. And since those skills and strategies are anchored to who you really want to be, it tends to stick on a deeper level. So a lot of things people experience in our trainings is really something they don't really notice. So I'm basically distracting them away from how they have lived so that they really end up experiencing themselves as the way they want to be, and before they even realize it. So in a way you can say that I'm positively tricking people into becoming okay before they even know it. And then I notice what signals they're communicating to themselves when they're okay. And then I start to loop that back to them so that they have this sense of deep well-being. And when they're truly there, I start to teach them how to communicate, how to interact, how to lead, how to do the things they want to do, but from this different starting point. And then as the training evolves and people get to the more advanced levels, I start to push and stress them, but from the position of where they're already okay, so that they become better at being okay despite what's happening on the outside. So I bring them to this solid, healthy core, and then I start to push them slightly. And when they can resist and when they have the resilience to withstand slightly push, I push a little harder and a little harder, so that they end up becoming really resilient, so that they can stay who they are, even in situations that are not okay. We have done this with the military. We have done it with leaders around the world, with salespeople. So this is our, and I think also that this is why a lot of people, they often say, wow, this was different. Because this was not about, I think I had a sales director some years back said, wow, I really would like you to teach our salespeople to not come across as being nervous. But again, if I have to teach people to not come across as being nervous, first I need to make them nervous. And then I need to train them to not show it. You understand? It's a crazy idea. You understand? But this is what people are asking for today. People are also asking for other crazy stuff like, you need to have a growth mindset. You need to be open, and you need to be open now. But again, But again, you cannot push a person to be open. It is like the more you push, the more close they become. So it's like even in very big organizations today, they don't understand humans and they don't treat humans as humans. So what we pay, and that's also why we call it personal selling and personal leadership. We really want to teach the participant who they are when they're okay, when they don't need anything, because from that position they start to want to learn things that can improve their efficiency when they work with the customers. And so it's really about creating this, in a way, safe space where they understand that, wow, I'm actually okay, I have skills, I have talent. Wonderful. How can I apply that in a useful way?
But it's difficult because we live in a world where you're constantly reminded of the opposite.
Yes.
So it's a whole different paradigm shift. And I remember, and I think about one of the first books that I read on leadership from Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And there's a lot of similarity here. And I remember him actually formulating and communicating ideas. It wasn't his own, but it was put into context of what personal leadership actually means. I remember the first 3 habits is being proactive, beginning with the end in mind and putting first things first. And I liked the stories and the frameworks, but I missed actually the steps to get there. Because I remember beginning with the end in mind, there was this visualization exercise where you're visualizing yourself at your funeral. And what would your best friend say? What would your colleague say? And what would one of your family members say about you? And then reverse your life from that point. What are tools and techniques that you employ in Neuro-NLP to actually help people, guide them in being proactive, beginning with the end in mind and putting first things first?
The first thing I would say is that I really also like that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because I think he outlined some really good ideas and structures. And what he do is he do it Socratically, he do it using language. And I think that's a big limitation, because some of the answers to really being proactive, really, in a way, begin with the end in mind, really making prioritizations, is you need to understand yourself on a pre-verbal level, on a non-verbal level, or on a somatic level to really get to the right answers.
Yes, because he's speaking to this part of our brain, the thinking brain that we use 95% of the time. But with the physiology, with the breath and the visualization exercise, you speak to a different part of the brain.
Yeah, I think with the breathing exercise, you are starting to access the body. So I think that can be a very good gateway into accessing who you really are. So, but I don't think he talks so much about breath in his book.
Not at all.
But it's really, he's talking to the frontal lobes and to the rational brain. And I think it's a very good introduction to personal growth and development. And I see a lot of people who don't really get it because they think they can think themselves to a better life. I would say you need to somatically make a shift so that you get into the right emotional state, because the emotional state is creating the frame within which thinking occur. And if you're not in the right emotional state, you cannot think the right thought the right way, and then you will not end up with the right behavior. So it's really about how to shift the basic configuration of who you are, so that you know how to basically non-verbally lead yourself to become yourself. And then from there you can start to think and act so that you end up creating the life you truly want.
But a lot of people got it the other way around, but they believe that they have to use their thoughts to direct their lives, where subconsciously it's actually the emotions running the show.
Yeah, for most people are not even thinking their own thoughts. That's the tragedy of this. Most people not even know they're not thinking their own thoughts. Most people are thinking the thoughts which have been put into them the first many years of their life.
The programming.
I
read that the first time in 7 Habits as well.
Yeah.
And now we're here to reprogram in the direction that we would like to go.
In a way, you can say that we are doing a fundamental reboot.
Yeah.
So we in a way bring people back to before the programming, and then we install new programs, but on the healthy core. That's what we are doing, to put it very simply. And I know it sounds a little strange, but it's actually very simple and not easy. And the reason why it's not easy is that people are different. So I don't have a script I can use with everyone. I have a process I can use with everyone, but I need to adapt it to the individual I'm working with.
Yeah, and basically taking your power back, and as an individual, we have a tendency as humans to say it's everybody else's fault, because then I don't have to take ownership of this.
Yeah.
And we're controlled about our own emotional triggers. We try to, that's a pattern of our behavior, but we try to blame other people for the way we're feeling.
Yeah.
But could we talk a little bit about that part of our brain? Because what I found very interesting with the approach of new NLP is the excitatory state, starting where the problem is not, versus the inhibitory state. Because in therapy, you go to the inhibitory state, you actually activate parts of your brain in the amygdala. It's the fight and flight response, and the more you dig into those things that really hurt you, the more you're going to be anchored in a state that's afraid.
Yeah.
So the perspective of starting in a different place, how do you help people do that?
I think if you take a step back, so basically we work from this idea that you can basically be in two different neurological states. And you say there's the inhibitory, the closed state, where you are basically in this survival mode, fight, flight, freeze. And when you're in this mode, first and foremost, you are thinking very short-sighted. So it's really everything is now and here, and it's also where you are very good at identifying what's not working, the problems, and basically what you end up will be a problem-solving machine. And it's maybe you solve a problem, but that doesn't mean that you end up with the life you want. You just end up with a life with one less problem. But what we are saying is that there's a way to shift your fundamental mood state, so that instead of starting in this survival mode, in this negative mode, you can learn how to lead yourself so that you can move yourself into what we call the green state, where you are in an not excited, but in an open neurological state where you focus on what's possible. And from that starting point, you can see different futures. And let me explain why. It's simply because when you're in a negative state, you tend to remember negative memories, and it's basically the negative memories in the hippocampus which are being projected into this part of the brain, which create the outlook for your future. But if you project negative memories into the future, you will also get a shitty future. So what we do is that by shifting the emotional state into an open, positive state, now you will have access to positive memories, which then again will be projected into your future and creating a more positive future. So again, if you don't master your emotional state, if you cannot lead your emotions, you cannot influence which memory you will access. And if you cannot influence that, you will not be able to envision the life you truly want. You will simply only be able to envision the life without one more problem. And I think this is how most leaders, this is how most therapists or coaches are working. Sometimes I say they fuck people up faster than they can do themselves, because they simply bring them to a position where they don't want to be faster than they can do themselves. So what I do is that I basically, in a way, reboot the system, bring people back to the point before socialization. And then from there, I help them believe that they can actually be successful as who they are. And then from there, we start to identify, where would you like to go? So what is your desired state? And then I help them move from what's working to what's fantastic.
And that is the exercise that is beginning to generate feelings of excitement and joy and gratefulness.
Yeah, because when you start to move in the direction of something which you really truly want, because you know that it will strengthen you in becoming who you want to become, then you will get these small dopamine rushes, because every time you know you're on the right track and you're moving in the right direction, it will create emotional rewards also. Yeah. And again, but what we do, which is maybe also important to point out here, is that what we help people to do is to build a future memory. So we start out by helping people really connect with themselves and be okay. From this position, they get access to really dreaming the true dream. But we are not only leaving them sitting here looking at the dream, we bring them into the dream and beyond. So we, and this is where we use the NLP technique, is to mentally guide people into the future where they have already realized the dream they are having, so that they get an experience of already being in the dream. So we basically install a memory of already having the dream before you get it.
Because your brain can't really tell the difference between what you're imagining and feeling from the imagination and what you're actually experiencing in the real world.
The brain doesn't really understand the difference between a past dream, a past memory, and a future memory. So in a way, it's as though it already happened, just not yet, as Joseph phrased it. And in a way, that tends to not only get commitment from the people we are working with, but it also tends to give compliance. They start to take action, because if they don't act, they have to give up what they think they already have, and that's not easy. No. So we basically install a very, very powerful compulsion in people, which allow them to move in the direction they want. It's exactly the same thing we teach salespeople to do with customers. And this is why I say that most likely we are having the only truly ethical sales model in the world. Most other sales models are really based on the idea of scaring people in to take action and buying shit from you, even if it's not good for them. Well, what we are doing is that we are helping customers realizing their dreams by the help from us. If there's a fit. If not, we don't.
And that's the beauty of sales, actually, because you cannot have an organization without sales.
Nope.
But if you also don't have a product that you believe in, how do you know if you believe in a product? Well, you need to know or believe in yourself to a certain point to actually be able to say, this is something that I believe in, and I want to push it forward.
And so from the personal salesperson point of view, of course, they need to understand who they are. And they need to understand the product or the service I'm providing. Does that allow me to be myself? And if not, find a different job. Exactly. If yes, now you have a really strong starting point. Yeah. Because again, you understand that what you bring to the world is something which allows you to be yourself. This works very well with good products that actually create real value. This is a shitty model if you sell shitty products.
Yeah. And I think maybe there's been sold a lot of shitty products throughout the times, and now we've reached a certain point where
I would say there's still a lot of shitty products being sold.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of unethical business in this world. And again here,
but also a lot of competition.
Yeah, of course. But I would say that again, what we help people is to bring them to a position where they can make a real choice of where they want to spend their time. And I believe that you don't have to work for a company selling shitty products.
Exactly.
If you want to actually have and create a positive impact, then maybe spend some time finding a product which actually create value. And there's plenty of them out there. We work for companies who do instruments for hospitals, which allow doctors to really save lives. I think that's a good product. We are also helping other companies working with laser, creating lights so that you can make really advanced microscopes, which again can create a lot of value.
Helping people do what they do best. So I want to try to go in this direction that most people have no control over their emotions and they react habitually. And that's the limiting beliefs or habitual patterns of thoughts and emotions that we've talked about. But how can somebody begin to replace some of these negative beliefs or emotions that they are continuously feeling like they've been practicing every day when they wake up? Because when we look at our phones, I saw an article yesterday about a young girl that using a filter from the TikTok app, and she's being reinforced and she's not good enough. So it takes a lot. How do you help people? What's the initial step to get out of this frame and begin to feel the more positive emotions?
I think first and foremost, I don't never have an ambition of trying them to fix the negative belief or the negative emotion. What I do is I help them to go to where they have the emotion they truly want to have. And so I do that by, for instance, asking them about something they like to do. I can ask them about are there something in your life you enjoy doing and which actually give you energy when you do it? And most people have things and then sometimes, but should it be something I have done recently? Not necessarily. But then they find a memory 15 years back where they still were doing things they like to do. And then I have them share an experience of doing that, because it's very difficult for a person to share a positive experience without going into a positive emotion. And then what I do is, while they are sharing this positive experience, I read their nonverbal cues, the cues they're sending to themselves, which allow them to remember that experience. And when I have read those cues, I can now teach them back those cues so they can use those cues to trigger themselves to go into the positive emotion, even when they don't think about the experience.
Okay, so now we're actually getting to what you're actually doing to help people reach this point, and this is actually for the second episode. So you're already moving past. But I think people
let's
out
go
there
back again and then
people should be curious, because once you hear something once, you need to hear it a couple times to actually get you into the state of actually understanding what this is all about.
So let's dive deeper in this later.
So Henrik, now we've covered NLP in a broad term, but also we've dived a little deeper into different topics of how we've actually worked with it. And I hope everyone out there is becoming more curious about this, because I know that I was when I heard it the first time. But we want to go a little bit deeper, because this is like a paradigm shift. Because in the next episode, we'd like to go deeper into what are actually the suggestions to start working with this. But before that, how can people access information about this? Where can they learn more about this philosophy, which I believe it kind of is, if they are curious for more?
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of products, and I would say that if you want to know something about, you say, the classic NLP, there are a few books of Richard Bandler I really would recommend. There's especially one called Using Your Brain for a Change, which is a very good beginner's book if you want to dive into that. And then from there's many more books. But I think for me that would be a good place to start. If you want to know more about new NLP and the way we do it, then there's the Do What You Do Best, Volume 1 and 2.
I like this one.
Yeah, which really give this whole idea about why do we start where the problem isn't, instead of starting with the problem, and where do we have that idea from. So I think that can also be a very good place to get some kind of insights. And then finally, I think on our YouTube channels, we have a number of small talks which speak to these ideas from different angles, which also I think can be an easy and good way to start. And then finally, we have some small articles on our website under Our World, where you can also read a few pages on different topics. Yeah,
that's very good, because and I want to remind that that's inspiration, because if there's anything I've learned on this session today, is that we can learn and get inspired from getting information to our brain, our thinking part of the brain. But if we really want to incorporate and learn and drive ourselves to a different direction, then we need to internalize in a different way. And that's what we're going to talk much more about in the next episode, about how to actually lead yourself. So I'm very excited to invite us back and invite you back. And for everybody out there, tune into the next episode where we will get specific. We will give you ideas and tools on how to lead yourself.